It was very organic initially. It was when I graduated residency. I read every single one of my contracts, didn't negotiate it a little bit just based on, what my mentors and other people had told me. But throughout the years as faculty, it was just a subject I started getting more and more interested and involved in. I started helping all of my residents negotiate. And so for every year, I have read all of their contracts. And, if you can imagine every single resident having multiple offers, I've read quite a few contracts now at this point. And realized, I think, as when I became a physician coach, and developed a little bit more confidence and understanding of the power doctors have in our healthcare system, realized how much more we could have actually negotiated and asked for, because really the system cannot operate without physicians. And so that's really where my interest initially kind of organically started and evolved. And it was interesting. We actually went to the same medical school but didn't know each other. And kind of started talking and realized we both had this shared same interest and ended up forming our company together. So I'll let you, share how you started getting interested in this subject.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Dr. Peter Baum, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm a family physician as well. And for me, early on, in my early career after residency, I actually changed jobs like once a year for the first 3 years, just because of life circumstances where my wife had gotten into like a postdoctoral program and we had to move. And then we like ended up moving back to the same city. So just for like, circumstances that were sort of also not necessarily related to only me, but my wife, right? I ended up having to negotiate a couple different contracts. And so for me, a lot of the residents that I had gone through training with who were years behind me ended up reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, like we heard you're the person to talk to about negotiating contracts. Can you help us with ours?" And it was something that I really loved doing. And I ended up helping a number of my, colleagues and friends out with that. And sort of like Cynthia, right? I've been a physician coach now for it's been about 5 years and have been working with doctors through different stages of the careers, early career, mid-career, even late career, through career transitions, burnout, et cetera. And, negotiating contracts has always been one of those topics that's always come up. A lot of people when they're thinking about changing jobs, they're like, I want to change jobs, but I don't know really I don't know how to approach this. I don't know if I have, what sort of like levers I have to pull in the negotiation process.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was like this thing that just I really love doing. I love empowering other doctors to do it because we're not taught this skill in medical school or residency, and it's just so easy to come out of training and you're excited to get a job and just, hey, let's sign a contract. Great, looks good. Okay, I'm going to make real doctor money now, not just like a resident salary. And oftentimes people just don't even think twice, right? But the reality is that negotiation is expected, right? Like medicine, and for as much as I want to say this and don't want to say it, it's like it is a business, right? And like and in the business world, negotiation is commonplace, right? And we're just not taught that in our training. And so, yeah, Cynthia and I, we met each other again, right? Like after years and through actually, a physician entrepreneurial space. And we're talking and said, hey, why don't, we both have this interest. Why don't we just like do this together, right? If you want to go far, go together. Why not?
I was going to say, and all of these skills, I think, are great skills to also apply, even if you have a current job that you love and maybe don't want to leave, and you're asking for a raise or a promotion, right? I think you can utilize the exact same skills that we mentioned and we'll talk about in those kinds of circumstances as well.
100%.
Well, we really appreciate you coming here tonight. Tell us the name of your business and where people can find you.
It is physician contract negotiation. Our website is www.physiciancontractnegotiation.com. It's interesting because if you go on our website, all of our branding is pertaining to early career physicians, but through the last, I guess, 2 years now that we've developed this, we've actually we have realized these skills are not pertained only to early career physicians. I think that's the target audience we talk to because we want doctors to have these skills early on so that they can continue to use them throughout the span of their career. And what we have come to realize, because now we have coached many, mid and late career physicians who maybe have never come across these skills earlier on. So, when you go to the website, it does say early career, but in reality, we actually coach physicians across, I would say, the whole career span.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I see so much on the Facebook groups how unhappy people are, right? They'll present, like a lot of times they'll be anonymous, which I agree with, because they haven't left their job yet and how miserable they are or what they're going through. And so whether it's early or mid or late, like you said, it's very helpful.
Yeah.
So normally what I do is I have people that have come in, like Comfort. Do you mind introducing yourself? Are you able to take yourself off of mute?
Sure. Hi. How are you?
We're doing well.
Hi.
Tell us where you are, what you do, what you're interested in.
Sure. I am in Northern Virginia. I work as an emergency medicine doctor. So curious to hear more about contract negotiations because I feel like it affects all of us all the time. So thank you for putting this together.
Of course. Iwa, are you able to come off of mute?
Wait, Mama, how's this wrong?
Comfort, I love that. I was going to say a lot of times people are with their children now because it's that time of like when they're getting home and all of that. And we just love that. We love that
Yeah,
we could do this
That's right.
from a phone where we could do this anywhere. The bottom line is that at least you get exposure to it and it makes you think and ask questions.
Absolutely.
Hi, so my name is Eva. I'm sorry, as I'm listening here, I'm not sure if I'm in the right seminar. I studied healthcare administration and cross-cultural psychology. I'm not a doctor. I have friends among doctors, like one of my best friends is an emergency room physician, and I have other friends who are doctors, but I'm not sure if this is for doctors only. I might have gotten an invitation by mistake, but I'm really curious because I'm at the stage where I have experienced a burnout in my career, and I actually am looking to make a major shift in my work. So I'm a person with a disability, so like I have some challenges, but this sounds really interesting to me regardless. So if you would allow me to stay,
Yes.
I would love to. If not, then I can of course leave.
I've never had a non-physician come in, and I appreciate your transparency, and I'm okay with it if you guys are okay with it. And then do me a favor,
Absolutely.
though. You're going to have to share it with your physician friends, okay?
Thank you, Candy. I will. I can promise you that I will refer them to your website because I'm taking notes, and I appreciate you allowing me to stay here. I love this environment. I grew up I grew up in Poland. I'm a daughter of a nurse, so I basically spent majority of my childhood in my mom's workplace. So I feel like I am a semi-doctor. Just kidding. I don't have the education or practice, but still,
You are.
I'm very passionate about humanitarian aid and human rights. So I think I'm at the right place regardless, because doctors do that too.
We're happy that you're here.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
ABUS, I don't know your first name. I'm sorry. Could you introduce yourself? Dr. Biswas, are you able to come off of mute? And if not, we have Sam. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself? No. Okay. So how about we get going? If you guys have a presentation, if you just want to talk, however you want to do this will work for us.
Yeah, we do. So I can.
It looks like Dr. Biswas.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want to unmute.
Go ahead, Dr. Biswas. Are you?
Hey, sorry, I'm actually was trying to on another thing, but thanks for putting this together. Thanks for presenting it. I'm a surgeon and I'm doing locums currently, but looking at a few contracts, so that would be helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, take it away, guys. I'm going to mute myself, but I'll be here.
All right. So excellent. We did brief introductions already. So I will go ahead and get started. So the goal of this presentation, quick presentation, is to really, I think, share with everyone, the bottom line is confidence, right? Confidence in yourself. So discover how to confidently negotiate your physician contract without feeling overwhelmed or undervalued. And I think that's kind of the trick that we get into is we think what we're offered is what we're worth, because in medical training, oftentimes based on the hierarchy in our medical education, we just we aim to please, right? And if that means this contract is whatever value that is given to us is what we're worth, we tend to just want to accept that. So we're here to kind of say, you deserve so much more, so much. I would say you deserve every single one of you physicians, excellent physicians, and you deserve everything that you want. And the key is to know what that might be, because once you know what that is, then you can ask for that in your contract. And so really this webinar is for everyone, residents, early career docs, and physicians who just want to learn more and want to negotiate your next contract or ask for a raise. So by the end of this webinar, you'll know what are some important terms to look in your contract, what to negotiate for, some of the key things we'll point out, and then how to negotiate. So really getting the best contract possible that reflects your value and worth. I know we did brief introductions, and so just quickly about me, I used to be in full-time academics. Currently, I only do part-time and contracted work, so I am part-time inpatient faculty at a family medicine residency program, part-time medical director of a multi-specialty private practice clinic, and also a physician career and life coach. And I do a ton of advocacy work. I'm in family medicine, and so I do advocacy work on our local, state, and national levels for family medicine. And I always say the most important identity I have is me being a wife and mother and wife is really my family. And so really all of your contracts, when we talk about negotiation, it's a reflection of the life that you want to live. I think that's really important because I think that's what makes us happy.
And Cynthia, I'm not sure if it's in presentation mode or not, if you've moved the slides, but it's for me, it's still showing the main the title slide. I don't know if that's showing for everybody else, or that's just me.
Yeah, but the slides look great. Perfect.
However, can you guys see anything? No, you guys
see the main slide and then the other slides next to it, like what's coming next. It's all perfect. I would tell you, it looks good.
Maybe if you scroll down a little bit here, there we go. Or try, yeah.
So on my screen, it's it's in presentation mode. So interesting. Okay, there.
Let's try it again.
Nice pictures.
Okay. So yeah. So again, my name is Dr. Peter Baum. For those of you who came in a little bit later, I'm a family medicine doc and physician coach as well. And for me, I've got two small kids. You might hear them in the background as I'm talking. One who's 7 and one who's 3. And before I'm a doctor, I'm a human being, a father and a husband. And just like Cynthia was saying here, right? I think one of the main things that we really got to focus on when we start thinking about our contracts is what do we want to prioritize in our lives first, as human beings, as opposed to just thinking about ourselves within our career. Because if we don't think about, the aspects of our life outside of our careers without prioritizing them ahead of time, it's easy to neglect those things. And so when we negotiate contracts, we really want, you and everybody out there to think about those priorities in your life ahead of time. And so there we go. And we can go to the next slide. So, how to get the most out of this webinar today is to be interactive, right? You can go ahead and use the chat box, ask questions as we go, and take some notes. Disclosures, Cynthia and I have discussed earlier, right? We are the creators of an online course and coaching program called Get Your Worth, contract negotiation for early career physicians. And we are co-founders and partners of Dr. Contract Negotiation LLC, and we are found at www.physiciancontractnegotiation.com. And just a disclaimer here, right? The contents of this document and the presentation, webinar, and video are online, or any online tools that are utilized today are informational and educational, and they should not be considered any kind of like legal, investment, or financial advice. So in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being extremely confident, and 1 is not at all ready or confident. How confident and ready are you in negotiating your next physician contracts? Let's just go ahead and get a little bit of an idea of where you all stand. Got an 8. What else? How confident are you all feeling in terms of being able to walk into a contract negotiation and advocate for your worth? More of a 1, a 2, a 5? Where would you say you all are? Go ahead and let us know in the chat. Or if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that too. 7. Anybody else? All right, why don't we move on? Cynthia, why don't you go ahead and take it from here?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like I thought I was, as a resident, I thought I was much higher than I actually was. And even now I feel fairly confident. And then you get put in a position where you have to start negotiating, and all of a sudden you're really challenged in actually how confident you are. And so I think that's, today we'll talk about the basis, but I think it is just important when you are going through that process to have someone in your corner to really check some of those limiting thoughts that we sometimes have. So understanding the basics. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think most of us probably understand why it's important to negotiate to have a good contract. I really believe that contract is that foundation to shaping a good work-life balance. We talk about work-life harmony. So things like administrative time, like your, bonuses, your revenue, how much support you have, all of that can be negotiated into your contract. And so a well-negotiated contract can really, really impact your overall job satisfaction, financial stability, and professional growth. And so I always say everything in a contract, every single thing can be negotiated. And so what is really the secret to a well-negotiated contract is really, really to know your worth. When you have the confidence of what it is you deserve and your value and what you can bring to the institution, it becomes kind of a different feeling when you're walking into that job negotiation. Suddenly it's what is it that you can offer me such that we talk about contract negotiation as a two-way street, right? You're bringing as much to them as they're bringing to you. But in reality, for you as physicians, you have so many options and you have complete control over what those options are. And I think for most physicians, we don't really sit down and actually think about all the options that we have. So like, for example, me at this point in my career, I've kind of hopped around to, employed, contracted, non-clinical, clinical work, and just the options are so endless. But looking at a traditional contract here, I think these are kind of the important elements that most of us think about when we talk about quote unquote negotiating a contract, right? Obviously, compensation is going to be at that top of those things that we think about, but we'll continue to remind you that compensation isn't the only thing to focus on. Part of compensation, obviously, you want to be clear about your salary, what the pay structure looks like, any bonuses or incentives you might have. But remember that your work-life harmony consists of so many other things too, right? Like your work schedule. how much call you might have, what PTO and sick time looks like for you, what your benefits look like, health insurance, retirement, relocation assistance, loan repayment, what the wellness programs look like, right? That can that can have a huge range from just kind of your basic simple EAP to some organizations now are really investing pretty heavily. Like I can think of a couple into physician wellness because they're starting to see that that's really, really impactful on patient satisfaction and patient care and decreasing turnover rates. What your malpractice looks like, right? If you have nose and tail coverage, remember that's something you can always negotiate is nose coverage. If you're thinking about leaving your current job and going into the next job, and if that next job wants you bad enough, that next job might be able to give you nose coverage to get you out of your current situation if it's not a great one. Or you're not able to get tail coverage because you haven't fulfilled certain duties in your contract. So that's just something to keep in mind. Professional growth, right? What your CME allowance and days look like, career advancement opportunities. That's something I always ask for and always on the lookout for the leadership track, how much time, how many years, what that looks like. And then of course your restrictive clauses. So these are kind of your three main clauses to pay attention to. Read every single word of your contract and make sure you understand it. I think that's number one is the most important thing, but these are probably the three big things to look out for. So your non-compete clause, I live in California, but I know we probably have physicians across the nation. There are certain states like California, fortunately, where the non-compete clauses really are hard to enforce, but that might not be the case in some of these other states that you're living in. And for some states, particularly states that might be rural or might have maybe one healthcare system that is that has taken over most of that state, that non-compete clause becomes really, really important. It basically can limit your future employment opportunities in a certain geographic location. So in some cases, you might not be able to practice, let's say, across the whole state. So when you're negotiating, you really want to make sure you're negotiating down on that time limit and on the geographic area. You can also negotiate down to specifics of what it is you can do. So instead of making it super broad, like everything family medicine does, you can kind of negotiate and put in certain things in there so that doesn't predispose you from, let's say, not being able to do telehealth even within that region. So just making sure that non-compete clause is as specific and decreased in location, geographic area, location, and timing as much as you can, and then specific physician duties that you want to include in that. So whether you're, I use family medicine because I'm family medicine, but let's say, you're OB-GYN. So if you want to, let's say, include hospital duties, but not other specific duties in there, if you can get that, negotiate that in there, that doesn't mean you can't do something else within your medical license still within that area. I hope that made sense. Non-solicitation clauses are another one to look out for. Basically, it's just saying you can't try to convince patients or other colleagues from leaving that practice. Generally, that one is, I would say, harder to negotiate. You can be pretty specific about non-solicitation clause. Also to say, within a certain time period, for example. And then termination clauses are another one. I think this one is really important. We walk into every new job or new contract not thinking we'll leave, I would say most of the time, but to protect yourself, I say the minute you walk into a relationship, because it is a relationship with your employer potentially, you want to have a good exit strategy so you don't get shackled for whatever reason if you're not happy. So unfavorable termination clauses are things like really lengthy periods or significant penalties if you end up breaking your contract early. So for example, you might have to give like a 3-month or 6-month notice, and maybe they only have to give you a 2-week notice if they, for whatever reason, wants to let you go. But you have to give a super long time frame. And then the other piece I like to just mention is just to make sure, obviously, like an open contract, I think is always best. There obviously are risks to that, but for me, it's the idea that I can walk away without any penalty at any given time. But in general, I say try not to like shackle yourself to anything more than a year or two for a couple of reasons. One, it's to give yourself an out if you really don't enjoy that working environment. And two, it also gives you room to renegotiate your salaries too, because sometimes those contracts have a fixed salary. Ideally, you want to negotiate, like ROI, for example, on a yearly basis, but sometimes they don't always allow that. So if you have an ending of a contract, that gives you an opening to kind of renegotiate some new things into your contract, like an increase in salary, for example. So things to remember, whether you know it or not, you definitely have the upper hand with negotiations. Remember, they cannot function without you as a physician. And if you don't like your job, remember that you can always leave. That is always your option. When we stay at a job, we're choosing to stay for whatever reason, whether it is money or whether it is family. We all have different obligations, but keeping in mind that you can always leave, you have lots of options. And today, telehealth is huge. And so that is always, and non-clinical options too, like even if it's temporary, is huge. So you can always, and locums too. So you could always do something in the meantime to kind of tide you over while you're looking for the next one, if that's something you choose to do. Preparing for negotiations. You're on mute, Pete. I see you talking.
Perfect. Thanks for letting me know. So number one, right? In terms of knowing your value, right? Yeah, there is a monetary value to that, but it's also knowing, being clear on what your skills are and what your technical expertise is. Writing that down and deleting all of those things out ahead of time. Right. So if you are like competent in procedures that other, physicians in your specialty may or may not be competent in, that, that's something that's going to give you a little bit of a leg up. Obviously, you want to be getting very clear about what your, certifications are, your fellowship training, and hone in on the skills that you've learned in all of those stages of your training, and really toot your horn when you enter negotiations, right? And really talk from a place of confidence about, how your training, your skills, your expertise, and the procedures that you do is going to add value to whatever organization that you're going to be joining in the future. You want to get clear on what your interests are, both in and out of medicine, right? So that you can know sort of also what your boundaries are and what your hard no's are going to be as well, in terms of like your personal outside interests. If you speak any other languages, right, that's something for you to also leverage in the negotiation process, along with any technology or EMR familiarity that you might have and the populations that you serve. Next slide, please. So, it is possible to do some market research in the process of negotiating. You want to get up to date about what, your industry standard is for your specialty, and there's large intra-specialty variation on salaries, across geographic regions and even within the same geographic regions. And so you want to know what the different compensation, salaries and other compensation sort of, modes are in terms of benefits in the areas to which you're applying. So there are national, and regional data out there on salary and surveys. There's professional associations. You can pay to get data from different organizations to be able to walk into a negotiation with some data. And so let's go ahead to the next. So what are your priorities? We've talked a little bit about this, right? And you want to know and identify ahead of time what your must-haves are and versus what the nice-to-haves are, right? So salary, benefits, the working conditions in your environment, call schedule, right? Having that stuff very clearly defined ahead of time as to, what your boundaries are going to be is going to be very important. If there's any sort of like minor job duties that you want to do or don't want to do, for instance, oftentimes people might be asked to provide a supervisory role that may be uncompensated, for instance, to be signing off on APPs, advanced practice practitioners, right, such as like NPs and PAs, right? And if that's something you don't want to do, you want to know ahead of time that you don't want to do that. Next slide, please. It's important to take into account here that salary is not everything. Considering your work-life balance and harmony here and your long-term career goals, right? You want to take into account your family commitments, personal health and wellness, right? Without those things, like we are not whole humans. We can work ourselves into the ground and life kind of just passes us by. So that's why we really want to get clear, ahead of time before walking into negotiations, what we want to prioritize. If you are looking to have professional growth and advancement, right, get clear on that ahead of time. List out the things that you're looking to hone in terms of your professional development at whatever institution that you're going to be joining. And obviously you also want to assess the institutional culture at whatever institutions you're going to be applying to and assess whether it's going to be a good fit. Because if it's not a good fit, then you might not want to end up being there. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we are heading into the negotiation process. Ideally negotiate, so you'll go on your interview, you'll talk with them. Ideally, your negotiation starts after you receive that offer. Sometimes it's an LOI, usually it's a contract. They might email you, they might maybe call you, or sometimes they might ask you in in-person meetings. And so after they offer you that contract is typically, I think, when negotiations start. Obviously, the base salary is the hot topic. It's what everyone wants to negotiate on. It is also the hardest to negotiate on because it has the greatest impact on your final salary at retirement and life savings. So most of the time, if they're going to negotiate on anything, it's going to be on anything else other than the base salary. Sometimes they'll give you like a bonus to try to accommodate that difference or that gap. You also really want to be clear about the compensation structure so you know exactly what to negotiate on in terms of that salary that you might be getting. And keep in mind, obviously, bonuses are lovely and great, but they're just taxed at a much higher rate. So anchoring, if you guys have ever read the book, oh my gosh, I'm looking for the book, the negotiation book. I'm blanking on that right now, but they talk about anchoring in here. And so what is anchoring? It's basically, you want to start, it's a bias, right? So you, if they ask you, you want to give a high but realistic anchor, meaning that you must have had done some research, which might look like online research on, in my opinion, I think asking people there is going to, if you know somebody there, ask them, or if you're talking with a physician, just being transparent, if you mind sharing. I think that's the best way of getting the most accurate information in real time. So I would say start with a higher anchor that's within reasonable limits based on market research and industry standards, and then just provide a justification, right? It's not just I want more money, but it is I think I deserve this amount of money. I think it's an adequate compensation because I am bringing all these things to your institution. So like for me, right, I might say my years of advocacy experience at a national level, years of negotiating experience, years of working with residents, medical directorship, quality, so all of your interests, maybe you're very passionate, interested about chronic disease management or whatever specialty within, whatever area of interest within your specialty. That's what you want to talk about. If you have any certifications, for example, you want to bring those things up. What you're offering is a clear reason for all of your, advantages, all of your amazing abilities that you're bringing to the institution, and why you deserve that salary because of that. Yes, Chris Voss. That was the book. Never Split the Difference. It's an amazing book. So much of what we talk about in our presentation in terms of negotiation is actually based on that book, even though that book is not specifically about contracts. It's about negotiation. Concepts are all the same though. So everything is negotiable in that contract. And what you'll hear is, this is a standard contract and you have 1 week to sign. Those are all scare tactics. You have as much time to sign as you want. Those time limits are arbitrary. Somebody made them up to put pressure on you because they want you to sign that contract without really understanding it. And when they say this contract is a standard contract, it's never a standard contract. Almost always there is something in that contract that you can negotiate. And if they really, really want you, they will negotiate with you. I've seen that at places, even places like Kaiser, for example, where they negotiate very little, but for that physician that they really want at that specific location because of their abilities X, Y, and Z, they will certainly negotiate with that person because they really, really want that person. So never believe when they say that. So these are all the negotiable items. Loan repayment, if anyone still has loans, sign-on bonuses, relocation funds, transportation funds, retirement benefits percentages, language bonuses, parking, CME time and funding and money, and your PTO, right? So like I've seen doctors where they say, we're really sorry, we cannot negotiate the salary, but we really, really want you. So we're going to give you more admin time and more PTO time. That was their kind of workaround, right? So, which is great. I don't have more money, but maybe that work-life balance, is that much better because I've gotten more time off now. Let's see, other things to ask for, like reimbursements for licenses, DEA, ACLS, board certification, call time, right? I think that's super important, and flexible scheduling, which offers autonomy. Let's say you have kids and you need to leave early. So having that flexibility and autonomy in terms of your schedule, I think can be important to a lot of parents. Having less call time or no call time, or if call times is one of your non-negotiables. It is one of my non-negotiables. I don't do any after hour or weekend calls. And so, like I said, it just depends. They will create the position for you if they really, really want to, and will be able to negotiate that. Productivity incentives, some places I've seen laundry, childcare, right? Professional memberships, and then we talked about nose and tail coverage already. And other negotiable items, right? Malpractice coverage. So like the timing on the malpractice coverage, I've negotiated that number down. I think in one contract I threw in 5 years and I was like, no, we're not doing 5 years. I can't remember. I think I negotiated down to like 1 year or something like that to get malpractice coverage. Moonlighting policies. Some places say, yes, you can moonlight. Some places say, no, you can't moonlight. Some places says, yes, you can moonlight with, if it doesn't impact your current standing with our place and you need written permission ahead of time. So whatever that looks like and whatever you are okay with really in your contract. Remember, it's what you are okay with. It's what's going to make you happy. I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Obviously medical, disability, life, and I've seen pet insurance too. So communication strategies, active listening, really articulating your needs and expectations clearly. For this particular point, I think the hardest thing for physicians that I've seen is actually knowing what your needs are, because we're not used to thinking about what we actually need and giving that to ourselves. And so we're used to pleasing, others, our preceptors, our bosses, the medical institution, the CEO, whoever it might be, right? And they're gonna want you to conform to what they want you to do. They have created a position and they want you to conform to that position, right? So just take 2 steps back and think about what your needs are and start from there. And once you know what your needs are, then I think you'll be able to articulate that so much more clearly to the organization. Be honest, right? Confidently state your request without being aggressive. Remember, you have all the reasons that you've thought about beforehand for why you're an amazing physician and why you deserve all of these things that you're not just asking for, right? You deserve them. And obviously be professional. We want to establish collaborative relationships because the world of medicine is incredibly small. Word always travels around. So I always say, be honest, don't lie. We want to foster collaborative relationships. We want to lead to, theoretically on as good terms as we can. They give you an offer, you're going to counter, obviously, hopefully, never accept that first offer. So counter anchoring, right? So let's say that your employer sets a low anchor, they give you a low offer. You want to counter with a well-researched, much higher anchor. When you counter, theoretically, ideally, I say always offer a range with the expectation that the employer will say yes to something probably closer to the lower end of that range. So like when we coach doctors, I say, what's your range? And like move that up because they're probably going to say, okay, what's the lowest number? Okay, we'll match you on that lowest number. So just keep that in mind. And then really reframing, shifting the focus from like what it is I want to what it is I'm offering you. What am I bringing you to this institution? These are all the things that you're going to get because I'm an amazing doctor with all of these amazing skills and abilities. And so this is what I deserve. So reframing it to like, you're asking for these things, but here's what you're going to get. Here's what I'm bringing to your institution. And then just keep in mind to, adjust your anchor slightly. That's why we talked about your must-haves versus nice-to-haves. Maybe you want to ask and be, a little bit more firm on your must-haves, but some of those nice-to-haves you still ask for, but maybe in the back of your brain, you're able to negotiate on some of those nice-to-haves. Other tactics, right? If you have multiple offers, definitely use them, leverage them, but don't lie, right? You can ask your first choice, well, this other place has offered me X, Y, and Z and this. So is it something, you can match? Leverage your offers against each other 100%. So just a couple sample scripts. I always get this question. Based on my experience, right, and the current market standards in my research, I believe a starting salary of X to X or whatever it is, right? This is just an example because I live in an urban part of Southern California. So this is for family medicine. But obviously with every specialty that this number is going to look different. So I believe a starting salary of $265 to $295 with performance bonuses at year 1, 2, and 3. And a sign-on bonus of X amount is appropriate because these are all the things I'm bringing to your institution, right? Or given the industry standards and my experience in X, Y, and Z, my interests in X, Y, and Z, I was expecting something closer to the range of, this number to this number. Let's discuss how we can possibly close that gap or bridge that gap, remember? And again, when we are coming in with salary ranges, again, this is another tactic. Keep in mind that lower range number is probably what they're going to try to offer. So whatever that number it is you want, shift that number up a couple tens of thousands of dollars to make sure you get that lowest number that you're offering in the range. We talked about this. Always, always, always plan your exit strategy. Nobody walks into a relationship thinking they're going to break up. But think about how many times you might change your job. And so it's just really important that you're protecting yourself in your contract.
All right, so key contract clauses to negotiate. Can you all hear me now? Perfect, okay. Next slide. All right, so as we've already kind of discussed here, right, termination, exit clauses are going to be extremely, extremely important. you really want to pay close attention to the periods of time and or any kind of severance that might be involved in any kind of termination. Oftentimes I'll say we see, anywhere from 30 to 60, 90 days in terms of the sort of level of notice that, people need to give. And the employer might say, we can let you go within a week or, immediately, right? There's at-will employers where you can both say, bye, we'll see you, right? You can walk out the door and never walk back in, right? There's a lot of different sort of timeframes out there in the termination clauses that you're going to see. And so you want to make sure that it's something that's going to be in alignment, with what'll work for you, right? If they're asking for a year-long, termination clause here where you've got to give a year notice, that's not necessarily something you might want to be signing, right? You might want to try to shorten that down. And the non-compete and non-solicitation clauses, right? We've mentioned that. One thing I'll kind of add on to what Cynthia said earlier is that, with non-compete clauses, I want to say there's something like 9 or 10 states where they're not enforceable, and the rest of the states, like, they are. Some of the things to think about for like geographic ranges, let's say that you're working at an institution that has, 40 clinics spread out over a geographic area of, 100 square miles, right? You want to get clear on the geographics of such, non-competes, right? And make sure that they don't necessarily apply to like that clinic that's 100 miles away from where you were working versus the actual clinic you were working in, right? Or whatever institutions you were in. Because that can play a huge role and have a huge impact in your job prospects after you leave an institution. The non-solicitation clauses, honestly, I think that nowadays I want to say it's about 80% of physicians are employed, right? That's a huge shift compared to what it was 15 years ago, where, there's a much higher percentage of physicians who are self-employed. They own their practices, right? And that change is accelerating, right, into the employed model, sort of with, big corporate medicine, private equity involved. And so the non-solicitation clauses used to be there a lot more to try to prevent people from basically leaving an institution and going hanging up their own shingle down the street, starting their own practice, and then saying, "Hey, medical assistant or nurse, come work for me now," and then taking all the patients. I think now with the employed model, that kind of thing is a little less likely to happen because people aren't going up and starting their own practices as much these days as they used to. But nonetheless, it is still something that you do want to negotiate and make sure you do pay attention to those clauses. If you're changing topics here a little bit, if you're in an academic field, or maybe you're in, I don't know, a surgical field or something like ortho, and you're into medical device sort of development, manufacturing, et cetera, right? You want to pay close attention to any kind of intellectual property clauses that are in the contracts. Because if you're involved in the development of new medical technology, you want to make sure that you're also protecting your own intellectual property there. At those points, it's depending on the nature of those clauses, it can be advisable to also discuss that kind of stuff with an attorney. And next slide, please. So part 5, reviewing and signing your contract. Before signing a contract, right, have someone else review it, right? Maybe that's an experienced mentor, an employment contract, attorney who's familiar with physician contracts. If you've got colleagues who've gone through job changes, and you can also talk to them about sort of what their experiences were. I'll just kind of throw this out there as well, right? One of the other leveraging factors in the negotiation process that I would highly recommend to people is that, don't be afraid to talk to your peers, for sources of information, because if people are going through similar circumstances of, having recently changed jobs, or they're going to change jobs, and, you can leverage that collective knowledge together. So, always be willing to compromise maybe on some of those less critical points. Money isn't always everything, right? If if maybe, for instance, like something like lower salaries and a shorter work week is going to help you have better work-life balance and stay in medicine longer rather than burning out sooner. Those kind of things are going to be important to take into account as you enter the negotiation process. Next slide.
And because I'm a woman, I have to throw this in here. Right? We already know that this is a serious, serious issue. Females on average make almost 28% less than men after adjusting for hours work. This averages to an insane amount of money, $2 million over a 40-year career. And this starts right away from graduation. So our male residency counterparts have a starting salary of almost 17K higher, and this is offered salary for the exact same position, man versus woman, 17K higher. So I negotiate aggressively for this pay divide. You will do this your whole life. And unfortunately, yes, this is the case, but also we really deserve it because we do so much. Whatever number I say in your brain that you want to negotiate for, what is a number that will make you throw up? And that is a number that we coach on so that you have confidence walking into that negotiation, knowing that you deserve that number. Negotiate aggressively your whole life.
And as a male ally, I will put all my support in there too, and just say, it's definitely that gender pay gap needs to be diminished to the point that it no longer exists. And the only way to do that is by negotiating aggressively for your worth and having the confidence, right, to be able to do that. So just to kind of wrap things up here, Cynthia and I started the program called Get Your Worth Contract Negotiation for Early Career Physicians. And, we help other doctors to empower themselves to walk into negotiations with confidence and advocate for their worth and their value. If you do have any kind of questions, right, we can always be reached at physiciancontractnegotiation@gmail.com. And our website is physiciancontractnegotiation.com. So with that being said, if anybody has any questions, right, we've got some time and we can absolutely take questions here. Feel free to just unmute yourself if you want to, or raise a hand or whatever.
Peter and Cynthia, it was an excellent presentation. I'm truly sorry that more people didn't come tonight. I will promote this in the group and as well as our newsletter. I really think that, like I had mentioned before, there's so many unhappy docs. And yet when it comes, and this is a wonderful presentation, and that in itself should have drawn people. So I feel like there's a disconnect. Either they've given up hope or they just don't see it, or I don't know, but I'll be happy to support in any way I can to help, you guys grow your business doing what you're doing. So
yeah, and for us, it's a lifetime membership, and we hold weekly group coaching and individual calls. It is hugely advantageous. So I'll tell you, like, for me, I think I know, right? I think I know what's happening. And then when I enter a negotiation, it is a whole different feeling to be kind of put in that spot. And it's just really helpful to have someone in your corner to really look at those limiting thoughts of like, am I really worth this? Like, is this something I can really ask for? It's just different when you're actually like in the process of doing negotiation. I'll just say that because all of us, it's nice when we talk about it, but it's a whole different field. I think when we're experiencing it, and our confidence is kind of on the line there. So I think that's why this program is so incredibly helpful, is because every time you come across wanting to ask a raise or wanting to move jobs or thinking about locums, any kind of those scenarios, it's our way of being able to remind you, like, how can you remind yourself that you really deserve all of the things in the world to make you happy, and that what you want, you deserve that.
I really like the idea of putting in the initial contract ability to renegotiate a year, which seems so short, right? But at the same time, everybody has their first foot, like their best foot forward initially. You don't really have an idea until you start doing it. And then, call that was supposed to be 3 nights a month is now like 5 because, like there's things that happen and somebody leaves and they don't replace them, whatever it is, it's really important. You brought up so many good points in your talk.
A year can seem like a really long time if it's not a good fit, either like culture wise or etc. Right. And so you just want to give yourself an out if that is the case.
Dr. Biswas, do you have any questions? Dr. Comfort, do you have any questions? It's a good opportunity to ask. You are?
I had a quick question. How do you negotiate for the moonlight policies? And recently I got a contract which was kind of so bare. I've never seen a contract like that. I've been in practice for a while, so I don't even know where to start from actually. But definitely I want to keep my moonlighting options open because these days all the healthcare systems are so unstable. It's good to have that.
Is there anything talking about moonlighting in your current contract?
It says no clinical work outside.
Okay, so if that's what it says, I wasn't sure because you said it was so bare. If that's what it says, then I would ask is what is it you would desire to do? And it sounds like you would like to have moonlighting options open. So is it you want them to like take that clause out entirely, or is it that you could maybe get written permission, or is it like what is it that you're thinking of around moonlighting that you would like to have autonomy and freedom over within this job?
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm supposed to have a conversation. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, even there was no mention of any kind of bonuses. After this 2 years, it's FMV, but they haven't really described it, so it was very vague. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, so all of the, let me see where it is. That also sounds like maybe whoever is creating the contract is, I don't know how much experience they have, because I've certainly gotten very contracts. I've gotten some contracts like that, which I think it's to my advantage because then I tell them exactly what I want to put in there and they tend to agree. So like this, I'm trying to find the page. Oh yeah, like all of these things, you could go through and say like no call, how much PTO, how much sick pay you want, what your bonuses, you can basically, if it's a pretty bare contract, you can basically like dictate what you want that contract to look like. Because my guess is if it's pretty bare, they might not have a lot of experience in that area. And so, yeah, you might have
that might
some
be a
more
good way
wiggle
to
room there.
reframe it. I was kind of annoyed with the way they did it, but I like your approach. I think I could reframe it to great. I can do whatever I like, and I can ask for whatever I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I want 5.
Go ahead, Cynthia. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, I would ask for all the things. If it's bare, I would
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah.
CME days, like career advancements. You could even ask for like yearly cost of living increases at like 6% or like whatever number you want. You can ask for all of those things and see what they say if they'll put it in there.
Right. Yeah. No, that's
and I would offer you to this idea, right? That any contract that you have, no matter what it looks like, whether there's things about it that are desirable or undesirable, every contract that you have is an opportunity for you to negotiate for what it is that you want. And sometimes it can be a little bit hard to kind of like shift that mindset a little bit, right? And so, for instance, like I don't know if in your current job, right, do you have the option to moonlight right now?
No, right now I'm just moonlighting. Actually, I spent a lot of time on one of the contracts in my prior job, which turned out to be a very short assignment actually, because I spent a lot of time back and forth and put a lot of effort. Turned out that hospital has a reputation of letting, kind of whenever they want, whatever they want, they do with physicians. So it didn't work out. It was a very short assignment. And finally, I realized that even if you put a lot of things in the contract, if they really don't want to do something or they don't, things don't work out their way, they can just, the physicians don't have much of a standing. That was my other experience. Like,
But if it's in your contract, that is a legal binding agreement, so you can
yeah, but how,
sue them
right,
to
right.
get
You can, but
what
how
it
many
is.
times are you going to be like suing them? These are big corporations. You really can't win against them. So they know that. And the physicians don't have a place which kind of lobbies for them, that you can go to the board or somebody XYZ and say, hey, like, which actually speaks on behalf of the physicians, right? So physicians are all like lone people who are working on their own. So the thing that they came out with was they did not have anything on like my clinical thing was great, surgical thing was great. They're like, oh, either like, you can we can separate out on a mutual agreement, or we'll have to put something for a cause. I mean, so they're going to manufacture something for a cause and put it, and then I have to kind of context that in the court, which doesn't make sense, right? So which physician would want that, right? So that's
So
the other thing I've noticed.
in my experience, if you're working for a large health corporation, it's actually much easier for them to settle than it is for them to go to court. So if you bring them a case, they
Mhm.
tend to want to settle with you and do whatever it is to make you happy so that you don't have to go to court. That's what I've seen with several large institutions, at least in my area. I don't know what your area looks like, and like I think it might look a little bit different based on the state. Like I said, there are some organizations just that it's like they take
Right,
over the
right.
whole
Now,
state.
this was also,
Oh,
yeah, you're right, because I think in California, New York, and other places, they'll do that. And I mean, I've never had this experience, but this is also a very rural place. So they call it shots, right? So whatever they do, they do. Nobody can question them. It's like that. So yeah, I think that was the issue partly, and they apparently have a bad reputation, which I wasn't unfortunately aware of. So yeah, I've never had this experience. So I would think the contract should hold true in situations, and that's why we spend so much time negotiating on the contracts. But yeah, I guess at the end of the day, yeah, some of the hospitals are. Yeah. Is there any clause to protect yourself from these kind of happenings, or I guess probably not, right?
I mean, that's why I say everything that you talk about needs to be in writing in one form or the other, ideally within the contract. Even if you have an email trail, sometimes I think that's helpful, because all of this it's evidence that you're gathering that this is your agreement. And if they break your agreement, then you do have grounds to be able to sue them. Now, most of the time, I think we're all physicians, we're all really good people. We don't want it. We don't want to do that. We don't want to get to that point. It's a huge headache. But if it's in a legal contract, if it's legally binding, you do have the grounds to do that if you wanted to. I personally have never had to go that far, because once we talk about anything legal, I think most places just, people want to avoid it
Right, right.
going
But I think this
that
place
way.
is just used to this kind of behavior with physicians, so
Yeah.
they seem pretty well equipped. So I
Yeah.
guess that, because their thing was, either you like, we kind of part on mutual circumstances, or we can always pull up a cause, and then that'll be more difficult for you in your career. So they're used
Yeah.
to this behavior, which is like kind of not like. Luckily, I haven't met, but yeah. So I was just wondering if there's any form of protection in such cases where they actually threaten you behind closed doors, and then
Well, your form of protection is your contract. I think your next question to yourself is, do you want to take that step? And I think that's not an easy question to answer.
right, yeah, no, I agree. Anyway, thanks for
Yes,
clarifying some of that.
Cynthia and
Yeah.
Peter, thank
Oh,
you.
thank you.
There was an email that was sent for someone that couldn't come, Dr. Khan. She had asked about large health systems, negotiating with them. I know that, like, kind of like what we talked about, they're very vague, a lot of those contracts. So if you could add anything there, or maybe I'll give you her contact, or just actually here, I'll just, you guys have the email and stuff. I'll have her email you guys and you could talk to her, because we are at time, we're past time, and I appreciate, I'm very cognizant of your time that you're coming here to do this for us, and everyone has families and want to relax before the day starts tomorrow. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was a wonderful
Thanks a lot,
talk.
everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having
Fantastic
us.
presentation.
Yeah,
Thank
perfect.
you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you guys. Take care. Have a wonderful night.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.